Hey, thank you so much for being a part today. Rudy, thank you for being here. Yesterday we talked about the first part of chapter 3. In the first part of chapter 3, God said basically to the people, the reason why you've got bad leaders, whether they're governmental leaders, or they're business leaders, or they're religious leaders, the reason why you've got some bad leaders is because you, people like Rudy and Bob, you've sinned. So he said this, your speech and your deeds are against the Lord, against his glorious presence. But he's now going to turn and he's going to put the responsibility on the leaders. And so we have some things like this. This is verse 9. Woe to them, they've brought this evil on themselves. You go back to all the things that God's taking away, you did it to yourself. All right, that's yesterday's lesson. Their hands have done will be done to them. And then he goes on, oh my people, your leaders have misled you and confused the course of your paths. And tragically that happens. We're going to get more into that actually in chapter 5. And now the Lord rises to argue his case. He stands to judge the peoples. The Lord enters into judgment now with the elders and the princes of his people. It's you who have devoured the vineyard. The spoil of the poor is in your house. What do you mean by crushing my people, by grinding the face of the poor? So why don't you just take off and you talk about that, and then I will. So
I think it's talking about inequality, and we see the inequality of the world. The United States is a very rich country. All the West is the same way. And somehow we believe that we deserve this because we're good people and we're Christians. But I think what Isaiah is trying to show us is that we need to look at our leaders and decide if their path is the path of the Lord's. And once that is somewhat put together in your purview, you have to wonder about yourself.
right.
And did you pick your leaders because they sound like you? Or did you pick your leaders because they sound like the Lord? And I think that's really what Isaiah is really talking about here, and what God is telling him. And it's like, I'm going to judge that because they weren't following me, that they weren't taking care of the weak in society.
Right. Very true. This is a fabulous passage for somebody who's looking for a speck in someone else's eye.
Boy, that is
to miss the log in his own.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Billy Sunday used to say, don't pop up your spiritual umbrella and let this message go off on somebody else. All right. So we're going to take down our spiritual umbrella. We're going to look at ourselves.
Hallelujah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what I would encourage you to do as you think about this is to do a little research on the internet about world poverty, world hunger. I would encourage you to just dig around a little bit and say, what is the status of health in the world? All right? Look at that. There's some interesting statistics. Let me just tell you a very quick story. Paul Farmer is one of my heroes. Paul Farmer is a Harvard-trained doctor and also a Harvard-trained man who tries to keep people healthy throughout the world. I don't know that particular title. He was in Haiti. And while he was in Haiti, he'd been run over by a car going to class at Harvard, broke his leg, and he took a long time rehabilitating. So he had to walk to go to a clinic in Haiti. This is years ago. And while he was there, they said, we have a man who's dying. Could you go see him? And quite frankly, he didn't want to go. But his conscience got the better of him, and he went to this man, and the man was literally dying in the midst of an asthma attack. Now, Paul Farmer has asthma. And so he pulled the inhaler out of his pocket, and he literally forced the man to breathe his asthma medicine. He had a $2 asthma inhaler. The guy was able to get enough in to actually puff a little bit more on his own. He didn't have to be forced. Now, Paul Farmer was able to get a ride back to where he was staying because obviously he couldn't walk. His leg was killing him. You ready for this? The next day, that man came to Paul Farmer and he brought him a chicken to say thank you. The only thing he had. He walked that whole distance to say thank you. Now, Paul Farmer has been around the world with all of his abilities to deliver goods. One of his major things is to say, healthcare should not be sold as a commodity. This man should have had access to a $2 piece of medicine to save his life. You hear that? Now, as I apply that to my life, I say, how can I be like Paul Farmer in the world where I live? So instead of condemning the powerful and the rich, we need to say, how can we be of service? Rudy, do you have more? I talked a long time on it. You got any more on that?
No, it's right where the Jesus kind of life lives, and it does take some self-correction every single moment of your life, but it becomes easier. You never get good at it, though, I'm afraid. There's some saints out there that God does allow for this to happen, but I'm not one of them. Because I know what Jesus was prophesied to die for.
Right.
And we misinterpret that if we take his life as a sin offering, and which it is, but it's actually more than that. It's Isaiah 53 says to take his life as a guilt offering. Right. And the guilt offering is when you break a holy commandment, basically because it was talking about years in the future, about our hearts being the Holy of Holies. And that's what Isaiah is talking about in this passage, that we have defiled the Holy of Holies.
Right.
So the thing is, Jesus died as a guilt offering, and that means the blood covers that. It doesn't mean that I like it. And I know that I know that he died for me. I know that he died for everybody.
Right.
I wish that it would self-correct my prideful thinking, because when I begin to think that that person isn't as smart as me, or that person doesn't know that, basically that changes everything that I do from that particular point forward, and that's what grinding the face of the weak in the ground is.
Absolutely. So that we're going to talk between grace and responsibility, and they both go hand in hand. Grace forgives us, but then it leads us to responsible behavior. Thanks so much for being a part. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to look at chapter 4. Rudy, thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you.